And we're live on Facebook. All right. Welcome to another episode of Elevate Your Grind, brought to you by the Cannabis Lab. Like I said, we're going to be doing a ton of these throughout the quarantine. We want to give all of our members a good chance to show themselves because we've put together one of the best group of cannabis professionals in the country. For those of you that don't have much going on tonight, or if you want to find out more about Cannabis Lab, check out our Meet the Member meeting tonight. It's going to be at 7 p.m. Eastern. You can find it on the Cannabis Lab Facebook page, or if you're interested in joining and seeing what it's all about, you can check us out at www.joinclab.com. Definitely a good meeting to check out. And also, for those of you that missed our interview with Ricky Williams, it was an awesome interview. I had a great time. Ricky and Lene are always awesome whenever they're around. We're going to be re-premiering that on Monday, 4/20 at 4:20 p.m. So definitely check us out. You can go to the Cannabis Lab page on Facebook or the Real Wellness page. Today, our guest is someone who has become a true friend of mine. I've met this young girl, as we'll call her, even though, we're almost about the same age, early on going to Cannabis Lab, and she just was someone who couldn't do enough to help me. So I'm very, very happy to have on the show someone who speaks at tons of events. Everybody's always asking her to speak, to the point where she's always looking at me and saying, I really need to scale this back. And then I see her at 10 more events. So please welcome Paula Savchenko.
Thank you so much, Todd. And thank you so much for having me on Cannabis Lab, Elevate Your Grind.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us. Well, Paula, you are a regular on a lot of our panels. You are one of the younger members of Cannabis Lab, but it's crazy how much you do, and you're everywhere. You're at every event that I've ever seen. You're always speaking. You're always giving great advice, connecting people. Tell us a little bit about what you do in the cannabis space. I mean, I know you're an attorney, but we've had some conversations, but let's educate our audience a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Sure. I think that's a great way to start. So I guess I'm just going to take it back a little bit more by telling you guys about how I originally got involved in the cannabis industry and what sparked
Absolutely.
my interest, because I think it's a nice segue into what I do. So I have been working for the same law firm since undergrad, actually. And this specific law firm, so it's called Moffa, Sutton, and Donnini. We're an administrative law firm. And this specific law firm practices primarily on tax and licensing work. And within that, I was mostly working under the partner that was doing regulated substances, including tobacco, fuel, liquor, pretty much any regulated substance other than cannabis at that time, because we didn't have a framework in Florida yet when I started working there. So, I was kind of curious about the cannabis industry as it started opening up in the state of Florida, which was in 2014-15 when Senate Bill 8A passed. And I was in law school at that time, actually, and I kept following what was going on through legislation. And I actually happened to take a class that was called Health Policy, Bioethics, and Quality of Care. I had no idea that the entire class was going to be focused on the cannabis licensing process.
That's great. And this was at Nova?
Yeah,
Wow.
at Nova. So I kind of just stumbled into it. And I was really one of the only students that understood what was going on because I already had the administrative law background. So it kind of was just like a perfect marriage and a perfect segue for me to start working in the cannabis industry. So from there, I started having conversations with the partners of the firm that I work with, and basically just told them I was really interested in getting involved in the cannabis industry. And at that point, their answer was, "That's great, figure out how to get involved." So, so from there, I kept following what was going on. At that point, we went through. I remember vividly writing my paper for that class and following how the Department of Health originally wanted to move forward with a lottery system to to give out the licenses for the initial 5 dispensing organizations, and then watching that rule get challenged. So I continued to follow it. And then as soon as I passed the bar exam, I just happened to be at the right place at the right time. I went to a conference that was the FMCC conference, and I believe it was Sarasota.
Okay.
Maybe St. Pete. Anyway, it doesn't matter. And I met a group that was looking for an attorney to work with them to put together an application. So this was maybe about 3 years ago at this point, 2-3 years ago. And this group basically wanted to move forward with getting involved in the cannabis industry in Florida and other states. I worked with them to put together their application. As you know, Todd, we all thought that there was going to be a second application process that opened up in Florida at that point. And fortunately or unfortunately, depending on who you are, we still haven't seen that happen. And I'm sure we're going to talk about that a little more as we get into this. And then, so I worked with them, and then I worked with a second group to put together their application as well. And both of those are kind of just sitting still waiting. So that was really how I got started in the industry, by putting together applications and kind of answering questions and regulatory compliance on the legal framework. Then because everything was so stalled in Florida from a marijuana perspective, I started looking to other states as well as for marijuana, as well as looking into the hemp industry in Florida. So then I started getting involved in the hemp industry. I worked with one of the groups on a pilot program application. I've done regulatory compliance for hemp groups. I think that the USDA actually approved the hemp cultivation permits to go through, the regulations to go through today. So hallelujah to that. And it looks like they're going to come out on the 28th. So very good news. I'm happy to be announcing that today. Nice. And then from there, you know, being an administrative law firm, we have done work with some of the current license holders, finding loopholes for them. For example, on their cultivation facility, do they have to comply with the fire housing code, and finding loopholes in laws and regulations for them. And then I also, again, happened to be in the right place at the right time and worked on multiple applications in Missouri, now West Virginia, and most recently Illinois, which I just recently submitted.
Yes. So Paula was supposed to be one of our first guests on the podcast, but because she is so busy with applications, specifically in Illinois, she couldn't do anything until today, and probably still taking up too much of her time too. So you were very, very busy with applications. How many applications have you done so far?
Okay, so 2 in Florida, then, okay, so I drafted 6 applications I drafted 5 applications, and then I reviewed 2. So I guess you could say 7, 8, 9, then 1 in West Virginia, which really was going to be 3 because, I guess that's 3 because it's cultivation, processing, dispensing. Mm-hmm. And then in Illinois, I have done a craft grow and an infuser. So there you have it. And now I'm working with a group to hopefully purchase a Florida license. And
very cool.
And we're also assessing a few other markets that we can talk about if you want to get into that. It's there aren't any states that have open application processes at this point, but there are several states that are going to have either ballot initiatives on their ballots later this year, or they already have passed a bill and they just need the implementing regulations. So next year, we're going to see about 5-6 states open up application processes that we haven't seen open up yet.
Very, very cool. So you're definitely taking advantage of that and getting out in front of it. I want to get into the markets that you're operating in right now, but One of the things I want to ask is, what is the process like working with these companies to get started, right? Everybody, I'm sure, once cannabis started becoming legal in other states or in their own state, had that thought or had that dream, and there's been Netflix shows about it, to open a dispensary or open a grow and have a cannabis business as your profession. I'm sure there's a lot of entrepreneurs that do it. What's it like when you have a group that approaches you and wants to go through the process? Would you say the majority of people that make it to your doorstep are dreamers, or are there a lot of solid people that are coming? Like, do you really have to wade through the dreamers to find the people that you want to take to the finish line?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I would say I would say it's about 50-50, right? I will say the majority of the dreamers are cold calls.
Okay.
Which I do take. I don't charge, I don't charge an initial an initial fee or anything just to take your call. And there are about 50% of those, and they get my information online, or I meet them at an event. And then the other 50% are by referral from someone else that I've already worked with. And those individuals are typically ready to go. They're pretty sophisticated. Sometimes they already have licenses in other states. They're just looking for someone to work with in that specific state that understands that framework. So I guess you can say, because of referrals, I've been pretty lucky so far, to be able to make connections with groups that are both well funded and knowledgeable to enough to move forward. However, when you're working with someone that has never been involved in the cannabis industry, and I'm sure you know from your background, there's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of investors that want to come in and get involved in this sexy industry, right? And they have no idea what they're doing, and you can't blame them. And
Mm-hmm.
it's a very steep learning curve to make someone understand, hey, you want a license in this state? Okay, sure, I would love to work with you. Now let's move, because these applications are opening up in 1 month and they're due in 2 months from there, right? Because when
Yeah.
you're starting already so close to the application deadline, it sounds like a lot of time, but considering how much you have to do, you have to secure the real estate. Sometimes you have to get a partner that's local, which is really difficult, because what do you have, a 1 month vetting process for someone you've
Yeah.
really never formed a relationship with, to give 51% control and ownership to this individual? So that's probably the biggest hurdle, which has started to not be as big of an issue, actually, because of a case that came out of Tennessee. It's a liquor licensing case, that essentially says, so this family wanted to open up a liquor store in Tennessee, and there was a residency requirement. I believe you had to be a resident for 2 years. And
Okay.
so they challenged it, saying, hey, that's not fair. That's a violation of the Dormant Commerce Clause. It's unconstitutional. And it actually went all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court agreed with them that you cannot have a residency requirement on a license. So now you're seeing some states still try to require this residency requirement, and then the big MSOs are coming in, multi-state operators are coming in and challenging that requirement. And then you're seeing either the entire process be held up, or they're moving through it pretty quickly and just going ahead and taking away that residency requirement. On top of that, they have to, be willing to make decisions quickly and really trust their application writer. I typically also bring in another attorney with me.
Okay.
I know you had Dustin on last week. I
Mm-hmm.
bring him in for business structuring and also helping on the application, and he's done vice versa with me. So it's good to have two people to look it over. It's important to have a lobbyist that's local that can tell you, what's going on the local level. For example, in Illinois, there were some rumors that if you didn't apply for a transportation license, then you were really hurting your craft grow and infuser applications. And I mean, how would you possibly know that if you didn't have someone on the ground there? So, I mean, I'm just getting started, but yeah,
Yeah.
as I've been lucky enough to get a lot of good referrals, but it's about 50-50, and it is a steep learning curve, as I'm sure you're very familiar with.
Yeah, no, it's not an easy process to do. It's definitely a dream, and people don't realize how hard it is once they get into it, because you have so many handicaps against you, especially not being able to access the financial system, not being able to operate like a lot of traditional businesses. You know, I've seen countless amounts of people who have excellent backgrounds in other industries, even pharmaceutical industry and
Yeah.
healthcare, crash and burn,
Yeah.
because it really is. You know, everybody says their industry is different. Ours truly is, just because it's a Schedule I drug, and nobody knows exactly what they're doing, and there's no standards across the entire industry, which is something I'm sure you're very familiar with because you work across the state. You know, what you just gave us was a ton of great information for people looking to get started about, you know, knowing the regulations, knowing the real estate, knowing, having to know if you need a local partner, or like, for example, in our state, I don't remember. I know there was a requirement, and I don't know if it's still there anymore, that you had to have operated as a farm or nursery for the past 30 years. And there was only a handful of people who met those requirements, right?
Mhm.
It's all crazy. Um, you know, one of the things I want to get into is your mindset, right? Because you have really seemed to be leading the charge in the cannabis and hemp industry for your firm. And you've had a very entrepreneurial mind, just going from market to market, seeing the opportunities, especially considering your firm is headquartered here in Fort Lauderdale. That's where you work. To be able to work in West Virginia and Illinois and Missouri, when you're looking at this industry as a whole, you're getting these referrals. And like you just said, there's 5 or 6 markets that are about to open up. How do you look at approaching a new market that you haven't operated in yet? How, you know, how much does that knowledge transfer for writing these applications and doing what you do apply from one state to the other?
Right. That's a great question, actually. So it really depends from state to state. For example, Missouri, they had really short, so they had about 64 questions per application, but each question was capped at somewhere between 300 to 1,000 words. So you really didn't have that much to work with, right? Then you
Mm-hmm.
move over to Illinois, where you have 50 pages to write a security plan, and then you can have attachments too. So I wasn't able to carry over a lot of what I did in Missouri and Illinois. And the group I worked with, I actually wrote their application in Missouri also, and they were really successful. So I was hoping to be able to use more, but once I started looking at the framework of Illinois, I was like, all right, this is going to be really time consuming, but that's okay. And what it looks like, to be completely honest with you, is it looks like me literally printing out the Cannabis Tax Act for Illinois, and it was like this thick, and just sitting there and reading through it and just absorbing it. And I mean, does it get easier each new state that I do? Yes, because of course some of the laws, the majority of the laws and the requirements and what the regulators want to see are similar, and you refine it and you get more organized every time. But it is, I mean, I am, just to be able to get a client to hire me, right? I have to be able to have a knowledgeable conversation about the framework of the state. So it is a steep learning curve again,
Yeah.
but it does get easier every single time. And I'm hopeful that, you know, now I have multiple templates to work with. I don't want to copy paste ever. And the regulations are different in every state. But I will say that it is helpful for anyone out there that is also writing applications. I will say that you can typically request the applications in those states as a public record. And Ohio actually has a lot of their applications on their website. And those were really helpful to me to just review. So usually before I do an application, I'll review the laws, you know, whether it's the Constitution, statutes, and then the rules. And then I'll also review either applications that I've written or applications someone else has written that are somewhat similar, just to get in that mindset. And then I mean, you know, Todd, that I literally lived out of a hotel for a month while I was writing this
Yep.
application in Illinois, because it's easier to be there if you're working. I mean, and I'm working with a whole team of people that are there, you know, so that's what you have to be willing to give up. And of course I am willing to give it up, but I'm also lucky enough to be working at a firm that allows me to do that and have that flexibility and supports me, and also to be able to find clients that find the value in me being there. So all of that is very positive, and I feel really blessed to be able to experience this in this way.
No, that's awesome. And trust me, I know that you work harder than most people out there. I mean, I've seen your office with your snacks from the night before. When I say the night before, not 7 o'clock, like 11:30, midnight type snacks still being in the office. You know, one of the things that is a recurring theme on this, when I talk to people that are entrepreneurial or really just young and striving to be successful in their careers in cannabis, is what you're willing to sacrifice. And you said it yourself there. You lived in a hotel in Illinois for the duration of that application. Talk a little bit about, you know, what it's like to really become a pioneer in this industry, because you are one. You're out there in front. You're helping people get licensed. You're creating businesses in this space, all the while you're speaking at seminars and giving workshops and everything else. What's it like right now? What are you sacrificing for that career that people don't see? Because I think it's a very important part of things. When people see successful people, they don't realize the scars that they have on their back to get there.
Thanks, Todd. That's so nice for you to recognize that and say that. You're a pioneer in this industry too. So I'm excited to get to watch all of us that are in this together continue to grow. I guess I would say what I have given up is the first year after I passed the bar, I literally worked every single day, almost every single day for the first year, right? So I really didn't have weekends much. I'm not saying I didn't live my life, but my primary focus was that. Then from there, I would say every time that I do an application, I have to then figure out how am I going to balance, you know, my day-to-day clients that I do regulatory compliance work for with this application. And that's a bit of a struggle, right? That's an adjustment each time that I commit to an application. I'm lucky enough to have the firm that backs me up and will help me with anything that, you know, I'm not able to work on during an application. But I know that some individuals that are working as sole practitioners aren't lucky enough to have that. Let's see, I'm trying to, honestly, Todd, like, I feel like I do give up a lot, but I feel like I get back so much that it's just worth it for me. And I feel like I get it back in so many more ways than just, you know, the very like front forward thought, oh, okay, well, obviously you're getting paid every time you do an application. I feel like I learn so much every time, and you know, it makes me so much more valuable for my future and wherever I decide to go, whether it's in this industry or another industry, and to continue to grow into other regulated substance industries as they come on board. For example, like psychedelics, right? I know that you and Dustin talked about that a little bit, and I'm really excited and eager to watch that happen and also be a part of that movement. And I think that this industry has truly changed my life and inspired me forever to realize that you can actually accomplish whatever it is that you desire, right? So I think it's done that for all of us that have been a part of it from the beginning. And that has transpired into every aspect of my life. So I'm so thankful for that. And the people that I meet through it are what does that for me, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's why we feel the way that we do. And not to plug our group more, but Cannabis Lab, we're there a lot. It's every other week. It's a 3-hour event. We get involved, but it really has become like a small, close knit family. We've all become friends. We all text behind the scenes. We all know each other, give each other business, refer each other. It's really become the pioneers of Florida, our little group. And I guess, folks like you and I, we don't feel like we sacrifice as much when doing business. It almost feels like you're doing business with your friends, right?
Exactly.
And that's something about our industry that I think is amazing. The people that we meet in our industry tend to be friendlier. They tend to be nicer, and they tend to want to help you out. And I appreciate the nice thing you said about me, but I'm just a fan of the industry. And if I can have a platform to help promote the people that I think are doing great in this industry, I'm very happy for that. Just being able to sit here and have a conversation with you and put it on the internet and people think that that's a job. I'm having fun.
Me too.
So, so you are working across a lot of states. You're even working in our state of Florida again. Do you have any stories or any lessons from that you can? I know a lot of the stuff you do is confidential, but just any lessons that we can learn from some of the processes that you've been through. Anything for people to look out for when they're getting involved in this industry?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I guess my biggest comment is, or my biggest recommendation is, do not judge a book by its cover at all in this industry.
Yep.
You never know who you're meeting. You never know where they're at. All different types of people get involved in this industry for all different types of reasons. And like you were saying, like when we go to C-Lab events, I always love when I moderate the panels. I always love asking people, what's your story? Like you asked me in the beginning, what's your story? How'd you get involved? Why are you passionate about this industry? What inspires you? And, for me, I'll say, sorry, backtracking a little. For me, I'll say what inspires me is the people that I meet. I love how open-minded and generous and just amazing people are, and very diverse. And the second one is that you're always challenged. Like it's so difficult for me to do work in another industry that has more answers or more case law, right? Because I love that challenge and I love adding value to my clients and watching it grow from beginning to end and holding their hand through all that. So I guess to anyone that's working in the industry or wants to, be open-minded and just keep in mind that you really are a guide and a hand holder to your clients that want to get involved in this industry. So be patient. So I have, don't judge a book by its cover. Take everyone seriously, because I've been guilty. I mean, it's awful, but I have been guilty of that. And this industry has taught me to be more open-minded and accept people for who they are more. So that, and then I guess, lastly, and I've experienced this multiple times, choose your partners carefully. So a lot of times you're having to make decisions really fast. Like, as I said, if you're trying to enter a state where you have to have that 51% residency requirement, or even as you said in Florida in the initial application process, you're 100% correct. You had to be a 30-year nursery in Florida. So you're finding people, mush mashing into each other very quickly and not doing their due diligence on each other, first of all. But second of all, even if you are doing your due diligence, make sure that you guys vibe from, just a personal level and what your beliefs are. Like, are you really risk adverse or not? Like, are you going to be okay with the tax planning perspective that your partner chooses that could be very risky when you're not? So I think that's really important to keep in mind for both groups looking to get involved, and as an attorney, because you should be able to step back and kind of guide them and poke holes in that before they have to run into an issue down the line.
I think that's great advice, and definitely don't judge a book by its cover in this industry. You might, a lot of sandal wearers, a lot of cargo short wearers, a lot of long hair, but they're just as professional and just as ready to go in this industry as anything else. I don't want to take up too much of your time because you've given me plenty and I know you've got a full plate, but one of the last things I want to go over is we're getting to a different point in the industry right now where you are writing a lot of applications, and you just said you're working with a group to purchase a license. So I think where we are in the industry with capital being kind of tight, we're about to see a lot of M&A, and we're going to start to see a lot of licenses change hands. At least that's my assumption. Florida is going to be a different story just because of the way things are structured here. But obviously, we've got a group of people who are operating, and I talked about this with Zach and Dan and VJ, that aren't doing anything with their licenses. So, they're probably going to get out of them too. What is the different approach to a transfer of a license or a purchase of a license versus going through the application process at the same time? Is it essentially the same steps, or does it get a lot more complicated when the license is changing hands?
Right. So there's a provision, there's a rule. I don't remember it off the top of my head, but I know it's in chapter 64.
You could have made it up. I think only 2% of people who watch the show could have figured it out that you weren't telling the truth.
All right. Well, I know it's in chapter 64-4. It's basically an application to change ownership, to transfer ownership. So you have to comply with that. Then you have to go through this process with Department of Health for changing hands, and Department of Health does take a really fine comb and look over everything before they approve that. So you do have to make sure that, everything is perfect. I would say that from a perspective, which one's more difficult or not, even for the applications, for Florida, you have to get a certified financial statement. So it's really difficult to hide the ball here. Either way, but I will say that Florida has been pretty strict as far as their transfers of ownership, because they look down on it. They don't want, we all know they don't want these licenses to flip, but guess what? The problem is that these people spent so much money on litigation and so much time. Some people didn't get licenses for 4 years after they put in their application, unfortunately. And at that point, there burns through so much money. Think about what financial position you were in, or I was in 4 years ago. I was in school still versus now. So of course things are going to change from then to now. And, I think that the Department of Health is obviously I cannot speak for them, but from my understanding and my experiences and conversations, it seems like they are loosening up a little bit as far as if they're going to be allowing transfers of licenses go through a little faster, because they understand where those 8 license holders are at, right? Most of them are on a really tight budget and just doing the bare minimum to get by. Those 8 one-pointers that came in at the end of last year, right? And just doing the bare minimum to get by. And they don't want to see someone doing the bare minimum. They want to see someone really doing amazing and helping the market and helping patients and being successful. So I think that they're much more open to alternative business structures that will pump money into these licenses than they historically were.
Yeah, to me, and I said this on the Compliance Guys webcast, when you have a state where there's only 22 licenses that were given out to begin with, as big as the state of Florida is, and as geographically large as it is, not just the population, that, there shouldn't be 8 people that are able to sit on a license and do the bare minimum, because at the end of the day, when you install this as a medical program, you're preventing your patients from getting medicine, right? So, I'm happy to see that there are companies out there that are working with people like you to change the hands of those licenses, hopefully to people that will put the medication out there that needs to be out there.
Yes.
So, Awesome. Well, Paula, I won't hold you up any longer. Thank you very much for joining me today. It was an awesome conversation. You definitely gave us a lot of great information for people looking to get started. I certainly want you to be able to promote yourself. So please, for anybody who's looking to get started or wants to get the application process started, and even in another state that's not Florida, how do people find you? How do we get a hold of you?
Thank you, Todd. So I'll give you guys my email. It's Paula, Paula, Savchenko, SAV as in Victor, CHENKO at MSD Tax Law, or you can call me at 954-323-2293, or you can see me at a C-Lab event when we start opening everything up again, hopefully sometime in the near future.
Yeah. I'm very much looking forward to get back to the in-person C-Lab events, although it is very nice being able to do these podcasts from my home and not having to travel around, even though nobody can hear my daughter's actually crying in the background. But for those of you that want to join us virtually, we are having a meeting tonight at 7 p.m. It is a members-only meeting, but if you want to join, check us out, www.joinclab.com. Paula is a regular at all of our events, so if you want to link up with her, definitely come check those out. Paula, thank you so much for joining us. And that we're friends, so I'm sure I'm going to have you back on this podcast many, many more times.
Thank you, Todd. It's been an honor. You're awesome.
Thank you. All right.